Hi there. This week we're revisiting our best performing episode of 2024, and here it is.
Stress is crippling, and I thought, this is going to be easy. I'm going to come in here, run this for a couple of years, turn it into a successful business and then sell it. Little did I know, because I was going broke. I was working massive hours and things just weren't working. I felt a real weight of burden. Am I doing everyone a favour by not continuing? 18 months later, our revenues doubled from where it was. We're on track this year to hit sort of 3 million. I feel like if you took everything away from me again, if the business suddenly died and I had to start from scratch, I feel confident I could do it all again, and it wouldn't take long before I was back where I am now.
On today's episode, I interview Luke Heyhoe from Carpet Repairs, who's a member of the $1 Million Tradie program and has built a super successful business in Auckland, New Zealand. Now, Luke has an amazing story of persistence in the face of almost overwhelming odds that saw him come close to losing his business and his home. He's turned the business around into a profitable machine and is on track to double his revenue. Tune in as Luke talks us through his challenging journey and shares all the lessons that he's learnt. They say success leaves clues, and on today's episode of the Profitable Tradie podcast, I interview Luke Heyhoe from Carpet Repairs. G'day, Luke. How you doing?
Great. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here today, mate. You've got a great story, and I was just going back through the notes when you joined the $1 Million Tradie program, as I like to do, which is fun. And I think it was March 2022. So you just purchased the business relatively recently, and you'd grown it. You're sitting at around, I think, 1.5 million in revenue. I think you had 8 or so people on the team, but things weren't, going that smoothly. If we're honest, there were challenges with the team. There was problems with efficiencies. Cash flow was really patchy, and you were stretched really thin. It's a really stressful time, and it was tough on you as well. So, can you talk us through why it was important for you to make some changes and get help when you did?
It was extremely important to get help because I was going broke. I was working massive hours and things just weren't working. I wasn't making any money. I was running out of cash. I was struggling to figure out what the problem was. I had my head in the sand. I was denying the fact that there was an issue to myself. It sort of took extreme circumstances, kind of knocked me around enough to go, oh, okay, something's wrong here. I need to fix this, and probably the first part of that was actually just acknowledging that there was an issue.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough thing to do, isn't it? To actually put your hand up and say, hey, things aren't going quite right. Because there's a lot of, I don't know about you, mate, but for me, there's a lot of, I don't know if it's pride, or ego, but it's that kind of thing. It's like you've actually, to acknowledge that there's something not right means that there's something we don't know or something we're missing. And that's, I don't know about you, but I find that a little bit of a challenge to admit that.
Huge. I mean, it was deeply embarrassing. I felt like if anyone shouldn't be facing those specific financial situation, the problems that I was facing, it was me. I had a background in accounting and finance, and so I knew better, but I wasn't acknowledging the problem. So, ego was massively tied into the problem.
Let's jump in and talk about that. So what did you actually do before this? Because it's not a normal background for someone to be in carpet repairs.
Yeah, unusual.
Not abnormal. You're not abnormal, but
thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
So I studied accounting and finance down in Otago. I finished my degree down there and went into accounting. I worked as a CFO of some large businesses in Auckland. And then my wife and I decided to go over to London, and I worked for a couple of years over in London. We got pregnant over in London, and so we wanted to come back home. And when I came back home, I was a bit sick and tired of running other people's companies, and went looking for my own to buy, and came across this unique little business that did repairs and maintenance within flooring, so specifically carpet. And so I saw the business, thought this is a great opportunity, business operating in a niche. It had good margins, good opportunity to grow the company. And I thought, this is going to be easy. This is going to be super straightforward. here I am with my training in accounting and finance. I'm going to come in here, run this for a couple of years, turn it into a successful business and then sell it. Little did I know how complicated and difficult that journey would be.
Yes, well, I think we were mentioning just before that business has a unique way of finding the points for improvement in our personalities and in our skill set.
Yeah, challenging journey to get into. Certainly going through that process of running a business has identified all of the areas of growth that were required.
I've had the same experience many times. It's humbling. Let's just jump in and talk about how that stress and the situation you're in, how was that actually affecting, you and the people around you?
Stress is crippling. My experience was that I was overwhelmed by the circumstances that I was facing. I felt a real weight of burden, not only to look after my wife and kids and make sure that the next meal would be there on the table, but also I was placed in a position of responsibility for these employees that were with me on my team and their families. The stress of facing basically financial disaster is really tough, and if anyone else is there now, I get that feeling. It's really tough. I think there's these questions that you're asking of yourself through that time of self-worth. Do I have anything to offer? Am I good at this? Can I ever be good at this? Are the mistakes that I'm making here, are they irreversible? Can I actually get back from this, or am I no good? And should I not try? Am I doing everyone a favour by not continuing?
It's tough, and I've been through a few businesses myself and been in a very similar situation. I can remember my parents-in-law actually had to buy the clothes for our kids for 18 months at one stage because we didn't have the ability to do that. And I think you're right. You definitely question your self-worth. I felt like a piece of trash, actually, to be honest. And I was too scared to talk to my friends about how their businesses were going because I felt so empty on the inside about where I was at. So that struggle is definitely real. And if you are in that situation, that's pretty normal to feel like that. But there is definitely a way out. And maybe we should look at that, because I'd love to know, how does your business look now? So, what are the changes you've seen? Where are you sitting now with your revenue and your team and profitability and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, great. This is super exciting. So 18 months later, our revenue's doubled from where it was. We're on track this year to hit sort of 3 million in sales. Our gross profit's somewhere between 45 and 50%, and net profit's somewhere up 20 to 25%. So massive improvement. There's cash in the bank. In the sort of worst of it all, we got into a significant amount of tax debt, and that's paid off. And that is a huge relief. So there's sort of 10 of us on our team. We restructured things, so we've got sort of 6 full-time techs in the field, and then we contract to another 6. We've got an office manager, office admin. I've got a commercial project manager, and me. My role's sort of head of sales and general management. We're killing it and loving it.
That's amazing, man. And what are the results of that meant for you and the people who are close to you?
It's meant that crippling stress that we were referring to before has dissipated. I've got time back to spend with my wife and my kids and my friends, and doing hobbies and exercising and looking after myself and enjoying life and thriving. I feel like the biggest thing that I've got throughout this whole process has been the personal growth that I've been through, the change of who I am, my confidence. I feel like if you took everything away from me again, if the business suddenly died and I had to start from scratch, I feel confident I could do it all again, and it wouldn't take long before I was back where I am now. And that's huge. It's awesome.
Yeah, massive. Big shout out to you, because it does take a lot of strength to do that. I think some people find it hard to get that strength. So I guess I just want to say well done, because I think that's another thing in business, isn't it? Often it's quite lonely and it's difficult to actually celebrate your success, because people kind of look at you sideways like, what is wrong with this person? Why are they celebrating their success?
Thank you for saying so. I mean, it's a big compliment, and I agree. It's a awkward conversation to bring up around family or friends, where you go, hey, I made $500,000 profit this year, and that's the result of a whole lot of hard work. You suddenly make them feel awkward and uncomfortable, and they don't know what to say or whether to encourage you for it, because it potentially speaks to a moral conundrum that they have.
I love that word conundrum, by the way. Phil's used that before. I love a good conundrum. Well, I think the thing with people who are near to you, family and friends who maybe aren't in business, one, the concept of making $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million is just not something that they can understand. And two, they have no way of actually identifying with the stresses and the challenges that you're actually going through, because they haven't experienced it. And they actually, literally, you're talking a different language to they are. And it's actually quite hard sometimes. So I think that's why getting involved with other business people, and it's one of the things I love about, the situation we've got with the $1 Million Tradie, is we can actually hang out with people who are similar and talk about that stuff. I don't know about you, but I find that really life-giving, really.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. It's quite possibly the best part about being a part of the Profitable Tradie program, is that business ownership is deeply lonely if you are unable to do it with anyone else, and there's always a divide between you and your staff. And so other business owners who are going through the same problems that you are, or perhaps they've already been through them, and they're reflecting back on what they learned through the process, is just invaluable. Partly from the camaraderie, partly because you feel acknowledged, heard, understood, validated in your concerns, validated in your frustrations. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think if I had, one sort of bit of advice for people who are listening, is get yourself around other people in a similar situation, and ideally people who are further down the road as well, because they'll have experienced some things that and have some answers that you don't have yet. Most problems in business have been solved before. We just got to find the people who've done it. It makes life a lot easier. Now, you've done some great stuff and made lots of changes, and I think you've done some things particularly well, and I really want to focus on a few of those on the podcast today, just so we can sort of share your wisdom with the listeners. And one of those areas is, obviously you had this, this cash flow situation, and as you mentioned, you had some pretty, eye-watering debts to the tax office. And at one stage, you were considering, well, can this business actually carry on? So can you talk us through the situation, what it was like at its toughest, like, kind of the size of the hole and where you were at?
If you'd asked me this question at the time, I would have really struggled to engage with it. And part of that was just because it was so deeply embarrassing. It was embarrassing because I studied accounting and finance. It was embarrassing because my wife's mother had passed away just before we got married, and she left her with an inheritance. And that inheritance was invested into our family home. And I bought the business with some of the money that we had saved from London, and also borrowing against the house that we owned. When we sold the house, eventually down the track, the bank sort of forced us to repay the debt that I had on this business. And so that's a long way of saying my wife's inheritance money landed in the business. Yeah. And so I'm looking at this $500,000 tax debt that I owed the tax office. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, if everything goes belly up here, not only am I the accounting finance professional who's thought that he could come in and run a tradie business and has absolutely shanked it, but I've also done that while losing my wife's inheritance. So it was like extreme.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
Luke, I'd love to talk through what led to that situation. I think one thing that you mentioned is that you probably didn't really have the experience or know what you're doing to start with. So I imagine that's something that didn't help.
Yeah, that's right. I think that this has been a process of growth. And when I look back, I wasn't good enough. I didn't understand. I had a high tolerance for risk, so I invested heavily, quickly, not really understanding the break-even points or how fast I could commit to those expenses. I think that I hoped that things would get better. I stuck my head in the sand. I didn't look at the numbers. Even though I knew how to, I was running from them. I was just hoping that things would get better the next month. I mean, the truth is, it came time to pay tax, and I didn't have enough money in my bank account to do that and pay my staff. So at that point, there was already a major issue. What I would do is make sure that my staff were paid. I missed my tax payment, and I promised myself that I would work twice as hard so that the next month I'd be able to pay the tax on time and pay the payment that I had missed. But the harder I worked did not resolve in the situation getting easier or better over time.
And you said there the word hope, because I can remember in a previous business being in a similar situation, and I'd look at the numbers and I'd be like, oh, well, that's just this month. It should get better next month or the month after. And then it happens for 2 months or 3 months, and you're telling yourself this story, and eventually the music stops. And you can't bullshit yourself anymore. And I think that sounds similar to what's actually happened, when you were going through this process.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So let's talk about what you did to actually get out of that hole. What are the key things you did that actually helped you improve this?
The first and the biggest one is not as practical, but it's the most important, which is I had to acknowledge that there was a problem. I had to actually admit that. I had to ask for help. There is a humility that needs to come before anything else changes. So you could have come and told me what the answer was in terms of how to get out of it. But if I wasn't in a place where I was ready to listen, ready to change, I don't think anything would have changed. What did I actually do? What did I practically do? There were about 1,000 different changes that were made. I did things like I looked at my pricing. I looked at where, like doing your back costing, looking at where you were making money, where you weren't making money. I looked at the overheads that we were committed to. I restructured our team. I looked at the type of work that we were doing. I worked out how, where the profitable and bigger jobs were coming from. A really big part of turning the business around and making it profitable is learning how to maximize the amount of money that you can make off the overheads that you're currently running. So
it's a whole bunch of things, isn't it? It's like you get in the situation with a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and kind of the reverse is true to get out of it. And I think a couple of things you've touched on there I've seen has been massive. One is actually understanding what work is profitable and what's not really profitable, and looking for more of the profitable work, because you've only got a certain number of technician or tradesperson's hours that you can bill. And if you bill them for shitty work, it's a massive opportunity cost. If you can switch it to more profitable work, that makes a lot more gross margin. Obviously, trimming the overheads is a really key part of it to make sure they're appropriate for your revenue level. And it's not necessarily slashing everything to bits, because if you do that, it's very hard to grow. So it's getting the balance right. So I think that's important. And I love the mindset thing. So I guess this ties into the next question that I have is, what advice would you have for business owners who, are listening and find themselves in a similar situation? What's the one or two things you would do to get started?
the first question that you have to engage with is, as I was saying before, you do need to reach a point where you've decided that you're actually going to change. A very big part of that is is understanding why you're changing. There's this saying that Jim Rohn has, which is, you don't need more ideas, you need more reasons. What it means to me is, if you have a clear idea of where you're going, what the point of this all is, and you've almost written that down and made it crystal clear in your mind of what you're trying to achieve and why, you feel committed to the outcome. It brings about motivation. With that, you can start engaging with these questions, which is, okay, well, how am I actually going to fix this? And I think that the first place in terms of actually fixing anything is fixing yourself. In order for things to change, you have to change. I found that the reason that I got into that situation and the way that I got out of it was because, quite frankly, I wasn't good enough. I didn't know how to run a business that was successful at the level of business that I was running. And in order to learn to be successful, in order to become successful, I needed to learn what it took to be a business owner that was running a successful company. What are the things that you need to do in order to get your mindset right, in order to lead well, in order to coach your team. On this podcast, like, I've listened to every episode. I love it. I'm a big fan. There are concepts that you talk about here, like how can you feel comfortable about charging clients a particular price. This was a really big one for me, is that a massive change and a massive reason for coming out of the dark hole was learning to feel comfortable charging not on a time-based economy, but on a results or a value-based. So going, hey, we're gonna charge the customer not out of my own pocket, but out of what this is worth to them, which opens up this fascinating conversation of basically going, well, what is valuable to a customer? And then how can we improve things like team uniforms, sign writing on your van, how you articulate the scope of work that you're offering to supply. In your quotes, what do the quotes actually look like? What does the email look like that you send them? Do you have like a Loom video as you send the quote? When the technicians arrive on site, what do they actually do? How do they treat the customer? How do you improve that entire experience? So as you answer these particular questions, there is this association with the charge rate that you are charging your clients. So you increase your prices as you feel more confident with the service that you're providing, which helps you to look at the service that you're providing and improve it and get better at it. And you spiral upwards. You sort of extract more value from the jobs that you're doing, while simultaneously creating clients that love you forever.
That's the sweet spot, because to deliver great value, you actually have to charge a premium price so that you can put the work in that's required to deliver great value. And I think you've hit on an amazing point there. Pretty much everyone ever who I've seen have cash flow problems has a margin problem. They're not getting enough from their jobs, means typically they're not pricing enough, and sometimes it's a productivity issue. Normally it's both. The easiest one to fix is the pricing, by far. And in that pricing is that mindset issue of worthiness, of value. So I think that's a gold nugget right there. I'd love to switch it around to look at the revenue side of things as well. So you've made obviously some great gains in revenue. I think you're on track to double, which is amazing. So what have been the drivers of that revenue growth?
One of them, just off the back of what we're talking about, is increasing prices. So as you increase your prices, doing the same amount of work, you're obviously going to end up with more revenue. Beyond that, I focused on a whole range of different things, but I'll talk about one of the main ones, which was I had this problem, and it was as I was noticing that our clients were becoming more and more price sensitive, specifically as a result of interest rates rising, the cost of living getting more expensive, people had less disposable income to be able to send my way. So what I was finding was there was less leads coming through, and that they were getting converted at a lower rate. And I thought, oh man, I've got a real problem here. In one of the boot camps, I came into that. This is a Profitable Tradie boot camp, and I came into it with a question, which was like, how do I reverse this trend? How do I get more leads, and how do I get them converting at a higher rate? How do I solve this problem? And I expected that the answer that I was going to find was I need to really focus on my follow-up process. Once I've sent a quote, how do I chase a client to see whether or not they want to go ahead with the job? Or maybe it was, how do I articulate what we're actually providing as a service, and make sure that that value was being communicated really well. I thought it could have been a whole range of different things, and what I was met with was basically this answer, which was, why are you trying to convince people who have become extremely price sensitive? They don't have money to spend. Why are you trying to convince them, or put all of your energy into convincing them that they should spend their money with you? Why not spend that same sort of energy going out and finding clients that do have money and are willing to spend it easily? And so this sort of, there was this quantum shift in the way that I was thinking about the problem. And so I left that conference and went looking for clients that did have money, that were willing to spend it. And so I looked further afield than our usual client base. I got into government tenders. So we do a lot of work for Ministry of Education and Ministry of Corrections. We do work for New Zealand Police and Turners and Growers and Placemakers. And it was finding clients that had money to spend and it was looking for a home. And there was a process of finding those clients and then basically establishing what it was that they needed. They were a different beast. It was a bigger client. Clients, like when you're working for the government, there's this massive advantage where you're not worried about them falling over and not being able to pay their bill at the end. So that was huge. It also felt like the bigger the client that I got, the fuller the schedule became. And so when I was running around trying to fill my schedule before, I felt like there's this principle that we've talked about, which is related to priorities, and it revolves around big rocks, medium rocks, small rocks, and sand. And the concept here is you want to put big rocks in the jar first, followed by ever smaller sizes
your
of
pebbles
rocks,
and your sand going next.
And the point is that you can pack out your schedule, your time with the things that are really important in life. Now that principle of big rocks, medium rocks, small rocks, sand also applies to the way in which you fill your technician's time in their schedule. So the bigger job that you get, the more of the schedule becomes filled out. And so when you start to get all of these smaller little jobs that come in, they just tend to fit around the bigger, massive, big projects that you've got a whole lot easier. And so I found basically that the time that I spent chasing down big clients was worth far more than any of the time that I spent chasing down the smaller jobs, because it filled out a massive chunk of the schedule. All of the other work that we otherwise would have got anyway just fit in around it. Our schedules were full. The guys were, the labour utilisation was huge through the roof. We were maximising the ability to make money off these fixed overhead costs that we have. Profitability went through the roof, and we did that consistently month after month after month. And so the way that the revenue really changed was changing where the work came from. So it wasn't just a matter of diversifying. it was the size of those jobs in amongst what we were already doing.
And there's a point here, and if you're listening, you might be thinking, I'm a plumber, or I'm an electrician, or I'm a painter, glazer, landscaper. I'm not going to go do carpet repairs. The point here is that if you have a cash flow problem and you have a margin problem, you often have a marketing problem, and the marketing problem is your target market. It's who you're actually getting your work from. And so the big strategy shift sometimes is to shift from low margin work and market into high margin work, or do more marketing so you've got more choice and you can work with clients who are less price sensitive. And they are out there for every business, even when the economic times are a little bit slower. And that's really one of the big keys to success. And I think you've done that exceptionally well.
I'll just say one other thing here. There's a really interesting but also hilarious point, which is that, and I'm just as guilty as anyone else of doing this, which is, as a business owner, to complain about the fact that my marketing's not working, and then someone asks me, okay, well, what are you doing? And then my answer to that being, oh, not much. Like, I can't find good staff. Oh, well, what are you doing about it? Oh, nothing. I don't even have a job advertisement on online. Yeah. Conceptually, I think we face issues, whether it's the amount of leads that are coming in. How is your marketing performing? And you go, I've got a real issue. But if you were actually honest with yourself and you asked yourself the question, okay, well, to what degree have you committed yourself to this? Certainly at the start, I would have felt like I was doing lots, and in reality, actually doing nothing. And that was the power of the accountability that this course brought, was basically going, okay, well, so you got a problem, you've identified what it is, what are you actually doing about it?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Well, nothing changes with nothing. And I think with marketing too, is a big mistake is a lack of activity. And often that's predicated, lack of activity comes from actually a lack of knowledge, which means we feel, kind of anxious or afraid about what to do because we don't know whether it works. And getting yourself educated is a massive part of improving your market. You don't have to be the world's best marketer, but you have to know how to ask the right questions and have a sensible discussion about it, and at least hold people accountable who are going to do it for you, hold them accountable. As a business owner, that's part of the price of having a successful business. And it's actually not that complicated if you spend a bit of time on it. And if you've passed a trade, you can definitely do that. It's easier than that. So I think that's a really good observation. Let's talk about profitability. Let's really jump into that. And we've touched on it a bit. What do you actually do on a day-by-day, week-by-week, month-by-month basis to actually hit strong profit margins?
One of the essential places to start is actually back-costing jobs and establishing whether or not you are making money on each of the jobs that are done. So even if you didn't, and I suggest that you absolutely do, and this was a key component, but if you didn't price the job for a particular gross profit margin, if you were analysing how the jobs actually landed at the end and were adjusting your pricing as a result, it would dramatically improve your profitability. And then if you add on top of that, having different target gross profit margins for the different specific types of work that you do, and there is a process within that is trial and error, which is continue to bump prices until you see that the money that you're making overall has actually been detrimentally affected. One of the questions that you're asking is, how much can I increase these prices?
Where does conversion suffer?
Yes, exactly. Part of that issue is that if you're not tracking the information, you don't know, and you have to go off gut feel. So it's really helpful to track your conversion. Mm-hmm. But if you're wanting to get that profitability, my advice is you need to back cost the jobs. You need to actually find out how they're going. You need to set targets for what you want to be making. Track your conversion rate off the quotes that you're sending out. And then, as I'm sure everyone's aware, it's about all of the other stuff that goes into this, which is about the efficiency of your labour, of your team getting out there, achieving jobs within timeframes that you've set.
And you've talked a lot about back costing and looking at jobs on sort of that micro level. What do you do on a weekly or a monthly basis with your financials in terms of the accounts that you run, and what do you do there?
I run sort of a monthly profit and loss, and then I compare that against what I had budgeted to do. Monthly is helpful, and it's a good sort of time period to look at, but sometimes you can have a great month and feel awesome, and sometimes you have a terrible month and feel rubbish. And I find that looking at a rolling quarter is a more helpful way to look at the recipe or the current performance of the business, and maybe you call it a run rate, where it's how the business is performing now, and the changes that you're making, you can see them played out as time goes on. So you're not looking at the month and going, God.
That's a funny thing you say, because I so often see the mojo and the smile of the business owner is dependent on that month's profitability. It's like, great month, I'm on top of the world, or this is a terrible month, I need to basically dig a hole and bury myself. And we know that in contracting type businesses, sometimes the cash flow and the workflow can be a bit lumpy, and there's work in progress and all sorts of crazy shit going on. So I think taking that rolling average of 3 months actually really allows you to see the trends that are emerging, and that's really what you want. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Let's talk about the stress a little bit. We've talked about it a bit before, and obviously had a massive impact on you. What have you actually done to help yourself stay on top of the stress levels?
This is really important because, as I was saying before, stress can be crippling, and the last thing that you need when you're facing some serious financial consequences is to be completely ineffective. What do I do to stay on top of my stress? So you have to look after number one. You have to realize that the biggest asset that you have, the thing that's going to make all the difference, is you. That no one's going to suddenly come in and save the day and fix everything for you. It's on your shoulders, and that can stress you out. Or the alternative way of thinking about it is going, I really need to look after myself here. So there's no point staying up half the night, getting completely run down and burnt out, and getting to a point where you're, as I say, ineffective at work, or you're so tired that your brain's just not working the next day. It can also lead to serious consequences where you burn out, you're depressed, you just don't have the ability to function anymore.
Yeah, it affects your relationships and the whole of your life.
Totally. So what have I found that helps? What I found that helps is setting a hard and fast time that I wake up in the morning. And what that means is that I get pretty exhausted by the time that I get into the evening, and it forces me to go to bed. I try to keep a set sort of bedtime as well and make sure that I get sleep, but really it's the waking up in the morning that makes all the difference. Getting outside into nature, going for walks. I love going into the bush and going for hikes. I like deer stalking and hunting, and to the degree that I can, I'll try to do that, but sometimes it's just too difficult to find the time to go away for days on end. But I can always find time to go for a half an hour walk, and it will revitalise me massively. Healthy eating, taking care of yourself. So to me, there's a difference between exercise and going for that kind of walk for my mental health. So I count them as two separate things and focus on doing both. A problem shared is a problem halved. So the stress that you feel under the circumstances of what you're under it's easier to handle when you've admitted a problem, you've talked about it with close friends or advisors, and that they're offering suggestions for ways to move forward. It's one of those things where you, again, spiral upwards or spiral downwards. So if you feel like you're actively acknowledging the problem and working towards resolving it, it can be inspiring. It can release the stress. It can feel like you're making progress. And as you see progress being made, it invigorates you to try harder and push more. So, yeah, how do you handle stress? You look after yourself first and foremost. You put your own oxygen mask on.
Yeah. Killer. Team is a big part of success and challenge for all of us in business. So what have been the main sort of frustrations that you've found coming in as a business owner? I know you've had team before, in your past life, but it's different when it's your business. So what are those frustrations that you've faced?
The biggest when you're running your own business is one where you are convinced that no one cares as much as you do, and no one tries as hard as you do, and no one's going to do as good a job as you. And so you're, certainly speaking from my personal experience, I found it difficult to trust when I handed over the reins of a task. I worried they would let things slip that were essential, that were crucial. It was also, we've all been there, but it's just super frustrating when you get, a text message at 6 o'clock in the morning about some pathetic reason about why they can't make it in to work, and you go, don't you care about this thing, and don't you know the stress that I'm under,
the red mist descends. It's like, I've actually got PTSD. I think I used to own a restaurant, and I had a lot of part-time people, and the phone calls before shifts, and it's like, I've got to find someone else to work, and half the time you'd end up doing the shift when you already worked all the hours that God had sent. So I actually am scared of answering the phone now. That's a true story. Anyway, with those frustrations, Luke, what have you? I think you've done a good job on this. What have you done to actually build a strong team, a motivated team, and a productive team?
One of the key things here is to understand that there are drivers, that there are things that sit beneath the surface in terms of what motivates individuals, what motivates us as people. It's important to build a team culture, but what does that mean? Well, what it means is identifying what you stand for, what's important, what is valuable. It's really difficult to do that if you don't have team buy-in to that process. So rather than just sitting down one day, deciding on all of those things and telling your team members that that's what they should be living and working and sort of getting on board with, you invite them into that process, ask for them to commit to a set of values and a set of ways of doing things, rules of the game that you've built together as a team, and then hold them accountable to that. We run a Champion of the Month trophy. So the concept behind this is finding ways to reward the behaviour that we're looking to see. And when you say reward the behaviour, you kind of sound like a parent with kids. And I know Phil often talks about the parenting books and being able to remove the word child and replace it with employee. And it's true. What I'm saying is, at the core, most people, and I haven't seen the exception to this rule, but most people want to feel heard, understood, safe, appreciated, valued, that they have a place, that the energy that they put into something is worthy, is worthwhile.
And appreciated, as you said.
Definitely. So when you reward your team member in front of everyone else, and you say, hey, what you did was awesome for these reasons, and for us, we have a Champion of the Month trophy, so we made a golden knee kicker, and we award that to our team member with a little cash prize, and if you looked at it at first glance, it would be insignificant because it was such a small thing, but it's huge in its underlying themes. So to be recognised in front of others is massive, and it's always tied back to the core values that we built together as a team and committed to and agreed to together.
So mindset's been a big theme of our discussion today, and obviously it's massive for success. So what are the key mindset changes that you've had to make to achieve the success that you have?
So I love this question. I love it because I think this is underpins all of the change that I've seen over the last couple of years. It's just huge, and it's a really simple concept, but you can just keep digging in terms of understanding it. The biggest mindset change that I had was understanding that in order for things to change, in order to for the circumstances that I was facing to change, it had to start with me. I had to change. So another way of saying that was the circumstances that you're currently facing are a result of what you have attracted by the person that you have become, the lessons that you've learnt, the skills that you've gained up until that point. So if you're sitting there right now, today, facing the same sort of circumstances that I was facing, heaps of tax debt, no money, you're actively losing it, and you're worried about everything going wrong, you could look at that scenario and you could say, I'm unlucky. Things just didn't work out here the way that I hoped that they would. It feels unfair. Or you could look at that situation and say, I'm facing these circumstances because I'm not good enough, and I need to grow and learn and change and embrace that growth in order for the circumstances to be different. So this is huge, and I think that change in mindset just absolutely released the next level of development for me. Was understanding that I needed to first start with myself. So I would face a problem like there would be a team member who was acting up, and I was like, man, I just need to get better staff. I need to find people who are going to do a better job of whatever it is that I was facing. But the truth is that when I looked at it, I wasn't actually a particularly good boss. I wouldn't hold people to a standard. I wouldn't keep them accountable. I didn't spend very much time coaching. I hadn't really engaged with concepts of how do you hire well? How do you find the right people? How do you run a sort of a performance improvement program, or a way of bringing people up to the standard that you wanted to be them at? I basically what I'm saying is that I thought it was somebody else's problem. I didn't think it was mine. So this headset change just released everything, where it was a concept of extreme ownership. Everything became my problem, not in a bad way, in a really good way, in a way that empowered me, that said, I can't do everything, but I can do these things, and I'm going to engage with them as earnestly as I can. And I saw a massive change as a result of growing and getting better and becoming more skilled and learning how to coach my team, or learning how to sell, or asking for help and then listening to what was actually said, and then going and implementing it, or doing the best that I could to implement that, and then appreciating and understanding that I was now on a, and I always have been, but on a journey of growth of I'm going to do it rubbish at the start, but I will get better. And as you get better, you get more excited about the progress that you're making, and it just spiraled upwards. As I said, just became better and better.
And it builds your confidence, which is a great thing. You actually know you can do it, even when it's a new situation which you haven't cracked before, because it's the same process. And as businesses grow, and you've made a great start here, but for me, there's more to come for you, and you'll have these challenges again in a different way, but you build the confidence to know you can deal with it. How important has been getting some outside help for you in this process of growth and success?
Essential. It's helped me to engage in the fact that in order to become better, I need to change. In order to change the circumstances, I need to develop. And if you accept that you need to grow, you accept that you need help, what you're saying is that the current level of development that you have has not been enough to release you into this vision of the way that you want life to be. And so something needs to change. It needs to be different. Now, you could take a wild guess at what that might be that you need to fix, but there have been people who have gone there before, who have done this already. What a coaching program does is it gathers those people together. It gathers the concepts and the framework together, and it provides this environment where you get to thrash out those ideas. You can test each of the concepts to their limit. You can completely disagree with them and tell a coach while they're wildly wrong. And through that process, you are engaging to really, more than anything, convince yourself of the truth that they hold. So why it's been so amazingly helpful for me is because it has provided a framework of all of the things that I haven't been doing or am not doing or have not been doing well enough. And it gives me this limitless list of things that I can be doing to improve my business. Beyond that, it gives me a priority order with which to work on first, and that's invaluable. So I'm not floundering around trying to fix some irrelevant aspect of my business that won't actually change the things that I'm trying to fix just because you're convinced that all change is good change, which it's not that that's wrong, but you do have scarcity, right? You've got limited time, limited resources, limited money, and so what you want to be doing is making sure that the energy and the time that you spend on whatever it is that you're working on in your business is going to be as effective as possible. So that's hugely beneficial. And then you've got this extremely capable, competent, and huge knowledge base of other like-minded business people, business owners who are going through similar struggles as you, or they've already been through them, or they're about to go through something that you've already been through a year ago, and you get to solidify the learning by going and sharing some wisdom that you've gained along the journey. So it changed my life, like no jokes, 100% serious, very sincere, and not a pitch because I've been paid underneath the table. I staked my name on it. It was huge.
Well, I think something that we had a few conversations over the last couple of years. When it's been tough, and something that I think I've mentioned a couple of times is that you're going to write a really great story for your life. And listening to your story today and over the last couple of years, you've started to write an amazing book. Maybe you're a third or a half through. I think there's a bunch more chapters to come. And you're going to see some amazing results in your business and the impact that'll have for you and the people who are close to you as well, over the next 2 to 5 years. So I think you should be really excited about that, mate. It has been an absolute pleasure hanging out today, and I really appreciate your wisdom. Look, I can't wait to see where this ends up for you, mate. So good luck with it, and it's been fun hanging out.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.